What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. I'll be your producer this afternoon, and today, myself and my host, my co-host here, Brian LaBelle, we'll be talking about the 2025 NFL Draft prospect known as Darien Porter, the cornerback out of Iowa State. So, Brian, how you doing, man? And Combine, we saw a little bit of it last week, and we saw a lot of guys stand out, and I know Darien Porter was maybe not on a lot of people's radar, but I think after the combine, after going back and watching some more film, he's really impressing people.
Anytime you run a 4.340, I think everyone's going to kind of take notice to that, especially at his size, because he's a bigger dude. He's 6'3", right around 200 pounds. That's kind of unheard of for a
Mhm.
guy of his stature. He can fly around, and then you got to pull up the tape. Obviously, he did a phenomenal job at Iowa State. He's a good ball hawk. I mean, like, this is a guy that realistically a combine, and this happens every year. You go from kind of off the radar, no one's really talking about it, maybe a sneaky late round pick, to this guy may have vaulted himself maybe early day two. I mean, maybe earlier than that. I don't know, because cornerbacks are always a premium. But I mean, it's just crazy what the NFL Combine can do as far as the money for him and as far as where he ends up.
Yeah, no, I mean he was definitely someone that stood out at the combine, and it's one of those cases where we see a lot of guys who maybe they might be higher picks going into the combine, and if they have a bad performance, then that could tank their draft stock. I mean, Will Howard, I know he didn't have a great day throwing at the combine, and I'm sure in some scouts' eyes that's gonna ding where he's going to get drafted in this upcoming NFL draft, but for guys on the flip side, like Darien Porter, who had, like I said, he's a bigger cornerback. He's got some good weight to him also. I mean, like I said, he's got a 4.340. He was just absolutely tremendous. He had a great three cone as well.
Mhm.
So it's someone who he showed his size, showed his speed, and just really kind of flew up some draft boards at school with Iowa State. And I think that is someone who definitely is really impressive now. And like I said, probably might have cracked the top 50 or so in terms of just overall prospects when before you could say he was probably out of it and closer to the 100 rank. But I mean, there's a lot of impressive corners in the draft. I'm not saying he's the top one. There's still a lot of really good ones out there, but his name's definitely higher up than what it was a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I think his only downside is, like you said, there's so much defensive talent in this draft. It's ridiculous. If you need a defensive player, this is the draft class to go get one. Just because the cornerbacks, the edge rushers, it's tremendous. And then watching his tape at Iowa State, I mean, they didn't keep him off the field for a reason. He blocked kicks. He was phenomenal at covering on special teams. He did everything for them. And oh, and by the way, he's our number one corner and like the anchor point of our defense. But I mean, he's got all the intangibles as far as the speed, as far as the size. I think probably playing at Iowa State maybe hurt him a little bit too, because the
Mhm.
Cyclones aren't exactly going up against SEC or Big Ten talent every single week, which the scouts and the talent people, they all love watching you go up against the best of the best in these different conferences. But I mean, he's got good football instincts. He's a good ball hawk. I mean, he didn't have a ton of interceptions, but he did enough to where I think as a DB, that's kind of a good thing because teams stop targeting you. They stop throwing the ball your way. And I think there was a lot of that with him because they're like, hey, this is the guy on defense you got to worry about, so let's avoid him altogether. I mean, other than like Will Johnson, Travis Hunter, obviously being like obvious 1 and 2, it's kind of murky after that. Maybe he sneaks into that third or fourth cornerback range. Maybe he's maybe a second round pick. Who knows?
And also the thing too is that he's still in a way learning the job because
Yeah.
he was a great high school track athlete and actually was recruited to Iowa State as a wide receiver back in 2019. And then after that, he played on special teams because hey, you got to do what you can to get on the field, and he showed out there. And then really, we only saw like I said, this one season at cornerback. But now you see kind of the more physical assets for him with his great speed and like I said, his 4.340 was tremendous. He's also an All Big 12 honorable selection this past year, honorable mention this past year. So uh, this was definitely the perfect time for him. He's a smart guy. He's got academic All Big 12 honors. So I mean, he knows what he's about. He's not. You don't hear about getting in any trouble off the field or anything, which a lot of scouts look for. And that's the thing too is that he even if he isn't going to be a starting cornerback maybe day one, he will have his presence known on special teams. He's
Yeah.
got 5 career blocked kicks. So, and that goes to show you his length, like I said, 6'2", 6'3", and then his speed, which, I mean, it's hard to just amount by how good he is and how quick he is. So I think that Darien Porter, a guy who, like I said, he's going to be maybe a middle round draft pick, but a guy who might have been a day, third round, fourth round guy, could be a day 2 or a second round, third round type guy just from his performance here. And people see that, okay, I might not need an immediate help for my cornerback. He might be a backup to start, and then maybe work his way to a starting job. But he's definitely someone who could be, a great special teams presence early on in his career. And if you see, if your team needs a win in week 7 and it's due to a block kick, it might be Darien Porter who's out there on the sidelines with the game ball in his hand. So he's got a lot of raw talent, and I think he's going to need to get some good coaching in the league, just kind of fine tune his skills. I think he's got some good potential, but he didn't play much. And I know Iowa State didn't have a tremendous season, right? They had some good success whenever he was on special teams. We saw when Brock Purdy was still there in company, but I think that if you just make sure he's got some good teammates around him, good coaches around him, he can improve as a corner, but I think he'll be an immediate impact on the special teams unit.
When you have a guy like him who can play 3 or 4 positions, he can go field goal block, he can cover kicks on your punt team, he can go after the punter on punts. I mean, he puts a lot of pressure on the other team special teams wise, and he fills up 3 or 4 positions on your roster. And when you have a guy that can do that, it makes it a lot easier. I don't have to worry about bringing an extra special teams guy because Darien can do it. I don't have to worry about blocking kicks because Darien can do it. And as a special teams on the other side of that, as a coach, you got to account for where he is. Not only is he a good cornerback, but he can do all those other things. He can do it really well. Because when you run a 4-3, there's a lot of stuff you can do on the football field. Whether he's still very raw, he's got a lot of teachable stuff that still needs to be implanted there by an NFL level cornerback coach. But I mean, as far as like the intangible stuff, it's just there's nothing more you can do. He's a physical specimen, man. 6'3", 195, 4'3", 40 is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, also too, I mean, just because he might not go round 1 or even round 2, maybe. I mean, we see a lot of guys who can contribute in the league aren't even top, day or round 1, round 2 picks. They're round 3, round 5, rounds. So yeah. I think that with how Darien did and how, like I said, he is a late bloomer. He hasn't played the position much. I don't see him being every down at the moment, but if there's certain schemes that you want to run, if there's like a cover 3 or anything along those lines, because he's a bigger guy, he's already going to be able to match up well with the NFL receivers, which a lot of corners are a little bit smaller in college and have to kind of grow into their body, but Darien's already kind of one step ahead of that. So I think that you will see him on the field on the sidelines in the cornerback position, but I think he's going to be a great special teams force, at least early on in his career. Before he can just develop and get a little bit better to become a full-time cornerback. But, Brian, what are your final thoughts on Darien Porter? I came away impressed with the young man, and I think a lot of other people did.
I think it's going to be difficult. I think originally he was labeled like a steal. All the people that are really in the trenches as far as scout breakdown and, players that are under the radar when it comes to the NFL draft kind of had him as a steal. But you can't really do that anymore. I mean, a lot of people talking about him now. They're talking about it on NFL Network, and I think it was Pat McAfee's in the studio when he just jumps back a little bit. He's like, "Oh my gosh, what did you see that? What is he? How fast is this kid?" So the special team stuff means he's going to have a lot more time to develop into a good cornerback. Teams aren't really going to be as worried about that because he's not a one trick kind of guy. He can do a bunch of different things for you, and he's very, very good at taking points off the board for the other team. And that's crucial for any defensive or special teams player. And I think a lot of coaches probably fell in love with him because of his speed. And they're looking at the other stuff like, oh, he can do all this other stuff too. Really? Maybe we invest a little bit of a higher pick into him. I like the guy. I think he's going to do well anywhere that he ends up. So not a steal, but he's going to be a really good draft choice.
Yeah, he impressed, right? So just going to go through his combine numbers here. So in the 40-yard dash, he was a 4.3, which was 3rd overall. First also among cornerbacks, so that lets you know how quick he was. Vertical 36.5, that was 9th. Broad jump 10 11, so that was 8th and 2nd among cornerbacks rather. He had the fastest 3-cone technique, 6.71. That's 2nd overall and 1st among corners. So I mean, he's really showed off his physical assets here. represented Iowa State well, looked good in the combine, and like you said, a guy who maybe would have been labeled a steal if you really knew him, if you really watched the tape at Iowa State heading into the combine. But now afterwards, after a lot more eyeballs have been on, a lot more scouts have seen him, I think you can kind of shed that label, and he's just going to be a good player and a solid contributor for many years to come, I think. So Darien Porter, cornerback out of Iowa State, looking forward to see where this young man goes and how he's going to be able to help out whatever team win a couple of ball games. So it'll be interesting to see come the NFL draft. Well, hey, for my co-host today, Brian LaBelle, appreciate you, man, coming on the show talking about Darien Porter, the cornerback out of Iowa State. I've been your host and producer, Logan Landers. Once again, if you guys enjoyed the episode, like, follow, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you again on another live episode.